Good afternoon and welcome to the CSSI Virtual Pre-Ministerial Forum, Caribbean Safe Schools, Increasing Resilience in a Multi-Hazard Environment. This is a stakeholder session, strengthening the use of data systems, informed decisions for a more resilient and risk-ready education sector. My name is Marcel Goyenete, and I want to welcome you for being with us today. Evidence shows that investing in the education sector is one of the most important investments countries can make for increased and more sustainable development for current as well as future generations. This session is about collectively envision the resilient education sector of the future and better understand how data and information systems, and digital technology can improve knowledge management and contribute to this more resilient future in a multi-hazard environment. I want to introduce the moderator for this session, Mr. Benes Kodra, Program Officer at the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CD. Mr. Kodra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marcel. And a pleasant good afternoon to everybody joining us within the virtual space. We want to say a big thank you for taking the time out to be part of this very important stakeholder session as we continue with our Caribbean Safe School Initiative Virtual Pre-Ministerial Forum. Again, thank you. As you would have heard from Marcel in terms of where we are, for our objectives, looking at our stakeholder session, we are looking to facilitate discussion and analysis with our various stakeholders around how to capitalize on the benefits while understanding the limitations and potential challenges, the dangers of digital technologies, and how to improve knowledge management for informed decisions, resulting in more resilient schools and societies in the Caribbean. We are also hoping to accomplish through breaking this broader theme down into more specific areas such as policy frameworks, infrastructure, and others. Our selected panelists, and you will hear from them shortly, will draw from these different subsets of a multi-sector and multi-angle approach to addressing this comprehensive issue. We will analyze how technology can make the sector more resilient and bridge existing gaps if well applied. We will also better understand how well positioned the region is to leverage these technologies, considering existing data and information challenges in the Caribbean. Additionally, greater understanding of what the region is doing well and where improvements would be critical. As part of our outcomes, recommendations for the fourth ministerial agenda based on the key messages and conclusions emerging from and being consolidated through the discussion. We will have an increased awareness on the importance of knowledge management and use of data, digital data options for improving safe and resilient education as the backbone to a more resilient society. And so we want to thank you again for being here, and we ask that you participate actively. We want to also share that you are to post your questions. The link will be posted in the chat through our Menti platform, and you are encouraged to place your questions, and those will be posed to our abled presenters. So again, I want to encourage you to please post your questions, and the link will be placed in the chat where you can do so. Again, thank you very much and welcome to our session on our stakeholder session of the CSSI Virtual Pre-Ministerial Forum. With this, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our first presenter, and she is no other than Miss Rachel Glenester. Rachel is an associate professor of economics in the Division of Social Science at the University of Chicago. She uses randomized trials to study democracy and accountability, health, education, microfinance, and women's empowerment, mainly in West Africa and South Asia. She has also written on strategies to stimulate innovation, promoting more equitable access to vaccines, and the response to Ebola and COVID-19 pandemics. Her book, Strong Medicine, Creating Incentives for Pharmaceutical Research on Neglected Diseases, with Michael Kramer, formed the basis for the advanced market commitment for pneumococcal vaccine, which saved 500,000 lives in low-income countries. Let me welcome Rachel Glenester to present our first presentation. Rachel, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. So it's great to be here. And hopefully my slides will come up in a minute. I want to talk to you today about the value of using evidence and data on what is effective in improving learning and making schools resilient to shocks. Miriam, are we gonna be able to get the slides up? Okay, great, thank you. Next slide. So I want to talk a bit about an initiative where we are using data in education to strengthen systems and support decision-making by ministers, by ministries of education and others, and in particular to provide them evidence on what is cost-effective to improve the operations of the education sector. So governments obviously need to know, what kinds of programs work for the particular issues that they're facing, but they also need to know what is cost effective, because nobody has unlimited resources. And so it's important to be able to think about and get data and do analysis on what is the most effective use of those resources. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I heard about the importance of technology. And we're going to talk a little bit about both infrastructure and technology, and where those provide important improvements in education and where they haven't been as effective. Next slide. We go to the next slide. Well, I'll start talking about the next slide. Hopefully it'll come up soon.
I'm really stuck. Sorry, it's stuck on annotate. 1 second.
Great. There we go. So I'm part of a panel which is called the Global Education Evidence Advisory Panel, which is a group of experts on education from all over the world and from different disciplines. We have psychologists, we have education experts, we have economists who are working in all different regions of the world, and who have come together to synthesize the evidence and provide advice to governments on what is effective in improving education in many different types of education issues, mainly focused on improving learning and access. But I'm going to pull out some of the evidence that's most relevant to the topic. So we're going to talk about today on resilient and safe schools. Next slide. So what we did as a panel is we had a process where we had a systematic search of over 13,000 studies that were rigorous empirical analysis on how to improve education. And then we also looked at the cost of those different interventions. And you can see on the right the results of this, where you can see different sort of interventions that have been studied. The second one is structured pedagogy, which I'll talk about in a bit, or the use of mobile phones in education. And you can see, little triangles for each study, but also this is looking at the cost effectiveness of different approaches. And so this is measured in what we call learning adjusted years of schooling per $100. So a learning adjusted year of schooling is saying, how much would it cost, or how many additional years of schooling will you get for $100? But not just years of schooling, years of high quality schooling. So this is measured against sort of a benchmark of what students could learn in a very high performing school. And it captures both more, whether an intervention led to children to go to school more, but also whether they learned more. And we use this to analyze kind of what's the most cost-effective approaches to improving learning. Next slide. So having done that, we've kind of sort things into these different buckets. And the great buys are things where there's a lot of evidence that this approach is very cost effective if it's in the right context. There's good buys. Then there's promising things that have a few studies. They look like they could be quite effective. In the few cases where they've been tested, they look quite cost effective, but there isn't very much evidence. The next bucket is effective, but relatively expensive. I don't think I'll be talking about that today. And finally, bad buys. So things where there's a lot of evidence that this approach is not an effective thing to do. It's not a cost-effective thing to do. So next slide. So obviously, you can't make broad sweeping statements about this is the right thing to do on education everywhere in the world, because it depends on what the particular problem is in the country that you're facing, or the particular problem you want to address. And, so political economy is important, context is important, what the problem on the ground is important, what the resources are to be able to tackle education is very different in very different contexts. So what we do here is we look at evidence from around the world, and we say, this is the kind of thing that is effective if you have this particular problem or you face this particular solution. So as people working on education in a given country, you will know what is the particular issue that you need to address. And today we're talking about, resilient schools, safe and resilient schools. So that's a particular question. And then we can look at the evidence and say, well, what has been effective in different places to achieve that, right? And what kind of place has it worked in? So the way to use our analysis is to look at kind of the particular question you're facing and the context. And for each recommendation, we have a section that says this is the kind of context where we think it would be effective. Next slide. So I'm going to pull out a few examples of some of the recommendations that I think are most relevant to the question before us today, which is, creating a safe school environment. And they fall into two categories. One is if you've had, say, a hurricane or COVID, or violence, which means that schools are closed, or children have fallen behind for whatever reason. What is the evidence about what you can do to help those children catch up once they've fallen behind? And then there's another set of recommendations that are about preparing for shocks, things that might make schools more resilient to shocks, and make children more resilient to violence or other risks. Next slide. So the first one falls into that preparedness category, and it is reducing travel times to school, making school more local. Now, this improves learning. It also improves resilience. And there are many different examples of how you can reduce travel time to school. But there's a lot of evidence from a lot of different contexts around the world that this makes children more resilient and makes them more likely to go to school. So, in Indonesia, it was a question of building more local schools. In Afghanistan, what they did when there was a security concern and children weren't going to school because of concerns about security, they had very local community schools in very local communities, so people didn't have to travel very far. That was particularly important for adolescent girls. We see a big increase in their attendance at school. Obviously, now with the Taliban, that is not as possible, but this was in a time when it was possible, but there was violence. Another way to reduce the travel time to school is not build more schools, but provide bikes for girls in particular has been tried to get to school. Again, when there's concerns about safety and security on the way to school. And again, that in very different contexts, that's proved effective. So this can both improve access and improve resilience, because even in a time of difficulty, children could get to school. Obviously, this is only a problem in some contexts. A lot of countries already have a lot of very local schools, and they don't need this. But where travel times to school is high, this can be an important intervention. Next slide. There's been much less work on safeguarding students from violence in schools, and we know that actually in school, there's quite a lot of violence in school, and also that children who are at risk for violence or at risk for perpetrating violence are more likely to drop out and not learn as much. But there is some evidence. So in Jamaica, there was some training that taught teachers how to develop positive relationships with children who were at high risk of violence and disruptive behavior, both at home and themselves. And this training proved effective in improving the teachers' experience of disruptive behavior in the class, and also improved their education outcomes for these children. There's some work in the US on cognitive behavioral therapy for high-risk boys who are at risk of becoming violent and getting caught up in gangs, for example. And that proved quite effective in reducing violence and increasing graduation for those boys. But we need a lot more evidence. I think this is a really important issue, and there are relatively few studies on it, but some promising ideas about routes to go. Next slide. Now, there are a number of studies about that have looked at ways to help children catch up after there's been disruption, after schools have been closed for COVID or children have fallen behind for other reasons. And one of them is targeting teaching at the right level. So often in a class, you will have children of very different levels of learning. And after COVID, for example, that dispersion just increased even more. So some children fell well behind when schools were closed, and others, you know, their parents were able to keep them going. So you had an even wider dispersion in learning. And there are a number of ways to address that. One is a very particular pedagogy that was first developed in India, but is now being used around the world, called teaching at the right level. And it splits the class into different groups where that are at different learning levels. Within, for a certain period a day, you say, okay, we're going to focus on math. Let's sort children by how much they know. And that allows the children to focus exactly on the issues that and the teacher to focus on exactly the challenge that that group of children have. And that's proved extremely effective. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. And I cannot talk about different ways of doing it in the Q&A. Next slide. Another approach which has proved very effective in helping children catch up after a disruption is supporting teachers with some structured pedagogy. And this is a coherent set of materials, training that is derived from the science of learning, what we know about how children learn. And it provides teachers with lesson plans and teaching guides, and has been very effective at increasing learning and helping children catch up. Next slide. So there are a number of things which are promising but limited evidence. I think one of the things I'll highlight here is leveraging mobile phones to support learning. So this can be done when you're in the middle of a disruption. So people tested it during COVID. And it doesn't replace schools entirely, but it does help children keep in touch with school when school is closed. And relatively short text messages, and, you know, asking them problems to work on can help children not fall behind as much when schools are closed. Next slide. And finally, I want to end by saying that I've talked about the things that are effective, but there's also a lot of evidence about what is not effective. And there's a big temptation to go to technology when, you know, as the solution to everything. And I've mentioned a couple of places where it is helpful, but simply providing technology in schools has again and again and again been proven to not actually improve learning. And in fact, in some cases, it has actually led to falls in learning because it kind of takes time away from other important things that happen in school. So just providing laptops, computers or tablets does not improve learning unless it's incorporated into some of these other things I've been talking about, like targeted instruction. It's also true that more buildings, more grants, more libraries, more salary for teachers, all of these, just more inputs alone does not make schools more effective nor more resilient. It's really about how you teach. That's the most effective way to improve learning in schools. And then the next slide. Yeah, I'll skip this one for time and go on to the final slide. Just show the last slide with all the reports where people can find a lot more detail on our recommendations, including a specific report that we did on prioritizing learning during COVID, which is very much targeted about what do you do when schools are disrupted, how do you catch up after school disruptions. And then our most recent report is the 2023 cost-effective approaches to improving global learning. So I'm happy to take questions. And Miriam, maybe you can take down the slides. Great.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That was a very comprehensive presentation. I know there's so much more information, so much more data that you can share. I'm really hoping that for us in the Caribbean region, we can probably tap into those resources that has been extensively researched, and finding ways, especially returning to school after the pandemic. And for us in the Caribbean, we are heavily impacted by, especially during the hurricane season, and there's a lot of lost time and getting back to education, especially for our students. So there could be quite a bit we can learn in terms of the recovery and so on. I know you spoke about the teaching at the right level. It sounds really good. I'm hoping to learn a lot more, but I can also see there are many of our teachers who will say to you, I am one person and I have varying abilities. So I'm going to start off with that one question and ask of you, can you just share briefly, how has this teaching at the right level worked? Because I know in the Caribbean and we have sometimes multi-grade teaching as well. How has this helped in terms of the whole resilient environment where education is concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. So the basic concept is that you do a very quick test of where children are in the early grades to understand whether children can read or not, whether they can recognize letters, whether they can recognize words, how good they are at reading or math. So the teacher does a very quick assessment, and you can do this within, 2 minutes. You can quickly, there's a special assessment that just one-on-one you go through, and within 1 or 2 minutes, you know where a child is. And for that, then that allows you to sort children into what specific skill do those children need. You can sort them into kind of four groups. Now, you're saying, well, I've only got one teacher and I've got these 4 different groups. How do I cope with that? Well, one way to do it is if you've got grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, or grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. I've seen it done both ways. You can do this quick assessment, and then if you have a teacher for each of those 3 levels, you may or may not, but if you have a school that has one teacher for grade 2, one teacher for grade 3, one teacher for grade 4, for an hour a day, you say, instead of having everyone sorted by their age, let's take all the kids in those 3 grades, mix them up, and then give one teacher all the children who are still trying to do addition or still trying to recognize, basic recognize numbers. Then another teacher will take the, more complicated, the kids who are doing simple subtraction and multiplication. And then the last teacher will take the kids who are much further along and say are on division. So normally kids are sorted by their age, but for at least, or they're, been sorted on their language, but they're fallen behind on math. So you just, for at least an hour a day, you sort children by where they are in their learning, and different teachers will take. So that's one approach. Another approach is to do a camp where you just take the kids who are falling behind, after school or a week in the holidays. And another approach is you get volunteers to come in and help the teacher so that you can do all those 4 different groups at the same time. So that's what I mean by there are various different ways to do it. But I think the most common way I've seen people do it is take 3 classes and resort them just for an hour based on their assessment. And what's different, it is not streaming. Let me explain why it's not streaming. Because at the end of a month or so, you retest them, and the kid who's learned moves up. So you're not stuck there for a year. You focus on that skill. As soon as they've learned that skill, they move up.
Thank you very, very, very much. I also need to apologize. I keep calling you Raquel. It's Rachel. My humble apologies.
I go by both.
I had a Raquel in my previous session. Maybe that's why. I have a comment here from YouTube. Please allow me to just read it to you very quickly. And it's from Alma Jenkins. It says, this issue of travel time and security is important in the Caribbean for migrant children. And we had that discussion in terms of the whole issue of migration in the region and so on. So maybe you can just expound a little, if you can, seeing what's happening in the region. We had the example where we saw Jamaica now preparing to take children from Haiti, for example. We've had issues where Guyana and Trinidad and so on, we are seeing migrants from Venezuela and so on coming through those countries. How do you see this now? It's a new phenomenon, so to speak, for us in the region. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I think, so one thing I would say is there's some really good examples of countries integrating migrants into their school system. So in Jordan, for example, donors provided that rather than having separate education for the migrants and the local population, donors provided support to the Jordanian education system as a whole. If, you know, kind of in exchange for them incorporating some of the migrants into the regular school system. And I think that that was a very impressive and effective approach. But the other thing that you can do, the other thing that's important is if you do have people in camps that are separate, then I think having these very local kind of community schools, you don't need to build a whole fancy new school always, but you can very quickly get, you know, often some of the migrants will include teachers. And so you can set up schools within camps quite effectively and quite quickly and try and make those safe spaces within the camps. So apologies, because I don't know the Caribbean context very well. I don't know whether people are, you know, in camps or whether they're probably both, or whether they're more integrated. But I mean, we've seen it in the US of, you know, New York, you know, having to suddenly respond and accept a lot of migrant children. So I think ideally you accept them into the regular school system, but, you know, absolutely go and ask donors and saying, we're accepting all these migrants. Can you support the whole school system? And that can help people get more integrated. But you can also do these, you know, very local if you're worried about violence or, you know, it's difficult to travel to regular schools. You can set up these community schools, which are basically just very local and use local resources, as in teachers, or and you support those to get them established, and that can work quite well.
Thank you very much for that response. We have one hand up, Ortez Valdez. I hope I have that name correct. Can you just unmute your mic and ask your question?
Sí. Sí. Sí, buenas tardes, con mucho gusto los saludos de La Habana, Cuba. Soy el profesor Orestes Valdés y trabajo en el Ministerio de Educación de la República de Cuba. Aquí al lado mío está la colega Aimee Betancourt, nuestra aliada estratégica de la oficina de la UNICEF en La Habana. Quiero hacer algunos comentarios muy puntuales y el tema presentado es muy fascinante y muy interesante. Quería decir que Cuba, el Ministerio de Educación, ha participado en los dos foros anteriores sobre escuelas seguras, pero reconocemos que tenemos que profundizar y hacer más explícito cómo se trabaja el tema de las escuelas seguras en el contexto de la educación. El segundo comentario es que en la etapa del 2013 al 2018 desarrollamos un proyecto de conjunto con UNICEF sobre el tema de la resiliencia. Y en este proyecto obtuvimos algunos resultados muy relevantes sobre los mapas de riesgo en las escuelas, propuestas curriculares de cómo integrar el tema de la resiliencia al currículo escolar y otras actividades educativas. Y ahora ocurrió la COVID y a partir del año 2022, 2023 y el presente 2024, estamos desarrollando un proyecto con otra dimensión, multirriesgos de desastre, vinculado a la educación para el cambio climático, la alerta temprana y la protección del medio ambiente. Y sin contar este proyecto ahora, porque no hay tiempo, y deseo dar también la posibilidad a otros colegas que participen. En los últimos 15 días regresamos de la provincia Granma al oriente de Cuba, y sin decir que el trabajo es perfecto, hay muy buenos resultados. Los alumnos elaboran sus mapas de multirriesgos ante desastres naturales, tecnológicos y sanitarios. Vimos que los maestros y los profesores desarrollan propuestas curriculares, y aquí quiero insistir en algo que estamos trabajando, de que tenemos escuelas multígradas. Un maestro que da clase en primero, segundo, tercero, cuarto, quinto y sexto grado, y el caso particular de una escuela muy apartada que tiene una matrícula de 8 estudiantes y que hay un solo maestro para dar la docencia a todos estos estudiantes. Y aquí estamos integrando todos los temas de multirriesgo de desastre, cambio climático, alerta temprana y protección del medio ambiente. Y algo que no habíamos hecho en el proyecto anterior, estamos trabajando el tema de la inclusión educativa, incluyendo a niñas y niños con necesidades educativas especiales, con problemas de conducta, con problemas de aprendizaje, y creo que es algo muy positivo. Para finalizar, el reto que tenemos desde el Ministerio de Educación de la República de Cuba, que si bien hemos trabajado la resiliencia y hemos trabajado los multirriesgos de desastre, ahora el reto es poner más énfasis en todo lo relacionado con las escuelas seguras, y en este año 2024, de conjunto con UNICEF, estamos modelando un proyecto integral para varias provincias del país, donde abordemos el tema de las escuelas ambientalmente resilientes, y el motivo es muy importante para incluir todo lo relacionado con las escuelas seguras, que en Cuba le damos otra dimensión y otra connotación. Un saludo cordial para todos los colegas, y ese es el reto que tenemos que trabajar en estos 2 próximos años.
Cambio.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Valdez. There is a lot from what you have said we can learn from Cuba. You are doing quite a bit of work in safe schools. I like the multi-hazard approach that Cuba is using in your school system. The protection of the environment, very important. Sustainability. The hazard mapping, it is something that we are taking to our schools. We are getting our young people involved as well in terms of hazard mapping within the Caribbean. Your curriculum development, really wonderful, the way you are now incorporating and integrating the whole issue of school safety, climate change, climate adaptation. I was very impressed with your multi-grade teaching that you just spoke of. Very impressed. So definitely a lot we can learn from Cuba in terms of what we are doing and best practices, and also ensuring there is inclusion. Your children with special needs, with disabilities, behavioral issues, and how they are integrated and made to be to feel part of the system. I really want to say thank you very, very much for your contribution, and we really look forward to the continued collaboration with Cuba. We know UNICEF is working with Cuba on several projects, and so we are looking at this integration where we can all come together. And I'm hoping maybe next year at our ministerial forum, Cuba will be given an opportunity where we can share best practices at our Caribbean Safe School Initiative next year in 2025. Again, thank you very, very much for that contribution.
Muchísimas gracias a ustedes. Solamente un comentario de algunos segundos. Olvidé de decir que todos estos proyectos que nosotros estamos desarrollando con la cooperación de UNICEF forman parte de las políticas públicas del Ministerio de Educación. Es decir, son proyectos puntuales. Ahora estamos cambiando los programas y los libros de texto de todos los grados, primaria, secundaria y preuniversitaria. Y sin aumentar mucho el contenido de los libros de texto, los resultados de estos proyectos nosotros los estamos incorporando a el currículo escolar. Y si no se puede colocar en el currículo escolar, en la orientación del maestro se le dan los conceptos de multirriesgo, cambio climático, alerta temprana, para que los alumnos tengan un papel protagónico. En ningún momento todo es perfecto. Nuestro comentario no es triunfalista, hay que aprender mucho de los países, pero por ahí estamos. Nos vamos a incorporar al grupo WhatsApp, a los correos, a la plataforma, y quizás en los próximos días, con mucha modestia, con mucha humildad, vamos a poner los reportes de los proyectos, los informes oficiales que son públicos y algunas fotografías para que ustedes puedan ver los resultados. Muchas gracias por su paciencia y nos mantenemos en comunicación.
Thank you very much again. And like I said, we will continue to collaborate and see how we can continue to learn from each other in this region. I want to take this opportunity to thank Rachel for this really great contribution and presentation to us. And I can see there can be so much more collaboration in terms of using this data and how we can make our schools and our education system a lot more resilient, especially in this region. Again, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you all. Bye.
Thanks. All right. It's time for our second presentation. And our second presentation will be presented on the data portal on evidence-based decision making. And this is going to be done by Mr. Jeffrey. Let me just introduce Mr. Jeffrey Charles. He is the his current position is Statistical Assistant 2 within the Central Statistical Office, based in the Census and Surveys Unit in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Charles is a member of the MICS 6 survey team. He currently works on the DataNet portal. He is an administrator for the CSO website and disseminating census data. He has been employed with the CSO Trinidad and Tobago for the past 19 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Jeffrey Charles. Jeffrey, you can go ahead. Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, I can hear you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Charles from the Central Statistical Office of Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm here to present to you our DataNet portal. Let me just share my screen. So, DataNet is Trinidad and Tobago's adaptation of the Data for All toolkit, which is funded by UNICEF and technically supported by Community Systems Foundation. This toolkit was initially developed to house and monitor the SDG indicators, but it has the capacity to be used as a data repository for both national and subnational data from multiple databases. And by the way, it's an open source toolkit. The DataNet portal was launched in January of 2024 as a launchpad for the Mix6 database, and it is now in the process of being populated with data from multiple sources within Trinidad and Tobago. Talking about data sources such as household surveys, population censuses, civil registration systems, and vital statistics systems. This is the homepage of the portal. And the homepage gives access to all the key components of the portal. So we see we have tabs such as, about, we have mix, we have SDGs, something called a data visualizer, which we'll see shortly. We have dashboards, a metadata hub, and a library. So if we scroll down the page, as we see, we have, here we have about the initiative. We have Mix6 data. We have links to the XDG goals. We have a library connected to the portal. And one of the most important tool, I will say, from the portal is the mobile application. Now, the mobile application is an app which was developed for the it's an app you can access the database via the website or the app. And the good thing about the app is that when you download the app, you need internet connection or data. But to actually use the app, you don't need internet connection, right? So it works without internet. So if I scroll back up the page a bit, all right, sorry about that. So if we go to the mix page, we see the mix page give a quick glance of the Mix6 indicators. So here we have the HSD is divided by the teams of the mix. So we have household characteristics, we have the survive team, and with each team, we have the key messages from these teams. So in the household characteristics, or the key statistics from that team, you'll see below here. We also have the mix snapshots, where you can download the snapshots from each team. Now, the snapshot is just a quick view of charts and graphs, and as the name implies, it's just a snapshot from each team. The SDG page is a page that just, for now, it just gives information on the goals. So if I were to click on goal 1, I'll see all the targets towards goal 1, and it does give information about the SDG indicators, goals and indicators. The data visualizer is a very important tool. So if I click on data visualizer, this is the data visualizer page. And the data visualizer, as the name implies, it allows you to explore the indicator-based database, to visualize it via charts, graphs, maps, etc. You can save the visualizations in a gallery. You can produce reports, and you can download these reports. So if I were to enter the data visualizer, this is how it appears, right? Now, the data visualizer allows you to explore the entire indicator-based database. So here you see we have, these are the chapters of the mix. As I said earlier, the DataNet portal is intended to be a data repository for data from all systems within Trinidad and Tobago, right? For now, we just launched it with the mix data. So there's data from mix 6 as well as mix 4. So if I were to go and learn, which is the education aspects from the mix, and I see the indicator, we have all the indicators from the learn here. And within this, we have over 200 indicators under learn. And see, we have it disaggregated by male, female, rural, urban, and total. And for the time period, we have the 2 years for the 2 mixed reports that are, the 2 mixed databases that are on the site. And what happens is the software automatically creates charts for all the indicators in the database. And this tool is not only about viewing the visualizations. This tool gives users the power to customize the visualizations, to change the look and feel of the charts. So if I were to click on, let's say to add labels, as simple as that, right? If I were to go further to say I want to view a table, I click on this and I get to see a table, right? Another thing is that because it's intended to be a data repository, we thinking of, I just pretend it's having thousands of indicators, then metadata becomes very important. So you're just one click away and you can see the metadata for each indicator. So the definition, the disaggregations, the unit of measurement, the source, and it shows you which SDG indicator it is linked to. Now, as I said earlier, it's not only about viewing, you can customize your charts. So if I were to go into settings, and let me just do it very quickly, and I go into series, change. You could change the color of the chart. You could change it just like making all the changes one would do in Excel, right? Very simple. And from there, you could download your chart, you could export it, you could share it. And we also have the visualizer also have a feature where you can log in, you can create an account, and you can store all your charts or customization in an online gallery. Now, you have other ways you could search through the visualizer. You could search by sector, by goal, which is for the SDGs. I'm gonna just show maps. Using maps, what maps does is for all the indicators that has data on subdivisions, we have them by maps. So you don't need to be a GIS specialist to create your maps. You come here, and once the data is available at sub-national level, we can have it by that area. It can even go down. We could even input data at the community level, right? And just as I showed earlier, it's easy to edit. You can edit the map just as I was editing the chart before. Our next tool we have is dashboards, right? So as I said, we only have the mixed data in it, so we only have a mixed dashboard. But as we add different sectors and different surveys and census data, we'll have a dashboard for each specific survey or whatever team we have. So the mixed dashboard, as the name implies, is a dashboard showing all the key performance indicators from the mix. That's a quick glance. So if I were to scroll down the dashboard, you see quick maps, quick charts, primary education, and all these charts could be edited slightly. They could be saved, they could be downloaded. It's just data at your fingertips. And as I said earlier, just like these charts and graphs are created and can be viewed on this website, it can also be accessed and viewed on the mobile application. And the mobile application does not require internet to use. You need internet to download the mobile application. However, once the mobile application is on your phone, you do not need data to actually use the mobile application. Only when update only when we update the as the objective is that we'll always be updating this portal with fresh data, and as fresh data comes, we will push that data to the mobile application. So you will see a message, update available. You update the mobile app, and that fresh data will appear in the mobile application. Then we have our library. The library, it just shows for now, we just have the mixed reports and the mixed snapshots, but the library can hold many reports, and we intend to fully populate it. Then we have a metadata hub, as I said earlier, because it's a database intended as a data repository from many sources. We must have metadata linked to it, explaining what the data is about, like definition, method of computation, and so forth. And that's about it with my presentation.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. I just want to encourage participants. Remember, you can post your questions in the chat using the link that is provided to our presenters. Jeffrey, just before I move on to the next presentation, one quick question. In terms of hazard mapping and looking at individual schools at a community level, can this software also do that?
Hi, well, yes, the software, what it could do is, say for example, right? Let's say, I know we mentioned just now about the time to get to school, to and from school, or something like that we are speaking about, right? So let's say we have a disaster or something in a particular, say in Port of Spain, which is the capital of Trinidad, right? From the census, let's say, we had a question on work and school address. So, say we narrow into Port of Spain and we say, the schools within Port of Spain, where are these children address, home address? So on the map, you could display, from Port of Spain, when you see like, we could highlight Port of Spain as an indicator and see like, where on a map, we could actually view it on a map to see the distance these children have to get home for evacuation purposes. So things like that is, where you could have at your fingertips on a mobile app, where we can actually see, visualize how far they have to go in case of an emergency. So yes, you could utilize it as for disasters, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, thank you very much to our presenter, Mr. Jeffrey Charles. We will move, I don't see any questions in the chat at this point, but we will move on to our next presentation. And our next presenter is Miss Michelle Ambrose. She is the Planning and Preparedness Manager, and she helps to ensure the DDM accomplishes its mandate to foster comprehensive disaster risk management in the BVI. Let me say that she's from the British Virgin Islands, working to strengthen the contingency plans of those agencies, departments, and private sector entities that are essential to emergency response and recovery. Ms. Ambrose has a background in project administration and coordination and holds a Bachelor of Science in Management Studies from the University of the West Indies, where she focused on tourism infrastructure post-natural disasters. She also holds a Level 5 Extended Certificate in Management and Leadership from the Chartered Management Institute, as well as an Associate of Science in Business Administration from the H. Lavity Stout Community College, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you and bring Miss Michelle Ambrose to present to us. Miss Michelle, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. I am happy to be able to share some information with you today on behalf of my director, Mr. Jason Penn, of the Department of Disaster Management. And like he said, my name is Michelle Ambrose, and I'm the Planning and Preparedness Manager here. And I work along with the team when it comes to school engagement and ensuring that our schools are safe. And what I want to share with you today is our perspective on making sure that the schools remain safe. And we really believe that collaboration is the best tool, is the best way to ensure that our schools remain safe for our young people. And I wanted to just go through a few steps with you, and we wanted to share even at the governance level, at the national level, we wanted to make sure that we had a strong foundation to be able to drive the safe concepts for our schools. And so with our comprehensive disaster management strategy, we were able to come up with a set of goals that we can extend throughout all the sectors. And relating to today's subject, especially education. And we have quite a bit of schools that we wanted to be able to target with this initiative. We wanted to make sure that whatever we put in place was timely. And we always wanted to make sure that through the monitoring and evaluation of what we were doing, tied back into the strategy, and ultimately made sure that whatever we were doing had the buy-in of all the sector agencies responsible or who has a part to contribute to our safe schools were very, very good and in place. And so at this level, we thought not just from the BVI's perspective, especially when it comes to safe schools, we thought that persons or agencies within the education sector and agencies who are responsible for disaster management and in the BVI's concept, the Disaster Management Office and our local Ministry of Education and the Department of Education as well were really the key persons who actually came together and put this SMART toolkit or evaluation tool or rubric that we use to be able to assess the schools under 3 different categories. There were the safe building practices. We wanted to make sure that our buildings remain safe. And even after Irma, we did have some challenge trying to ensure that some of the structures, even after that hazard, remain safe for our students to use. So we did take some time to go into the schools and make sure they were safe. But as a part of the overall project, as part of the overall safe schools concept, one, the schools had to be safe for students to be able to occupy. There was another plan where we wanted to make sure that these schools practiced safe practices, in less words, making sure that they have the adequate plans in place in terms of disaster response. If something was to happen during education time, they would have the different tools to be able to safeguard the kids and get to safety in the event that something happens while, during teaching time. And as a part of this whole toolkit too, we wanted to make sure that they considered the environment, making sure they reduce their carbon footprint, even as they go ahead and execute their mandate in the classrooms, the teachers, utilizing more greener sources, more digital sources. We also have another concept. We wanted to make sure that they tie back into our agriculture sector, ensuring that they have school gardens and they create a sense of sustainability in case we were to have a food shortage. These kids at that level will have the education and the know-how, how to be able to supply or to better sustain themselves if something was to happen. And they could take some of this information home. So everything that we have put in place in these toolkits and the different standards and the rubrics that we use to go out to the schools and assess the schools, they all tie back into our national strategy and making sure that even at the even at the younger kids level up to the governance level, these kids and these schools remain safe. At the evaluation sector, this is what we call the operation level. Even after we've come up with a toolkit, we have the evaluation tool that we use to go out and assess the schools to see where they're at in terms of safer building, safer practice, and also adding the green practice. We work closely with the principals. We work closely with the principals to make sure that we cater whatever needs that they have, we cater to their needs, and we understand that each one of these schools have a specific needs in the BVI, and as well as the persons, the other countries, other region partners. There are schools for the disabled, schools for those persons who need just a little bit more help in learning. We have persons who are the little ones, the little kindergarten, the kindergartners up to the tertiary level. I mean, at this present moment, we have our tertiary levels and some of the other schools, daycares and so on, who are currently safe. And we've been able to work specifically with the administrators, the principals, to be able to cater to them and help them to be able to meet these standards. And we know after we put all of these things in place, our goal is now to invite other persons to participate in our initiative. We have quite a bit of NGOs and non-government private sector and other donors who wants to be a part of this initiative. And so once we're able to have our plans and our strategic technical experts in place and also working with the schools, we now can invite other persons to come in and assist us or work along with us to be able to meet these objectives of the Safe and Smart Schools concept. And with this concept and with this assessment, we were able to invite persons within the private sector. And one of the things that we're currently working on is a Smart Schools project. Currently, we have funding from ResinBid. ResinBid's main objective is to be able to help the regional partners be more resilient, energy efficient, and they also look at marine biodiversity within their member states. And just to reiterate that what we are doing here in the British Virgin Islands in terms of ensuring that our schools are safe, we have our overall concept where we want to make sure that the schools are smart. So it's safe, which considers the safe building, safe practices, and then the green element, which is those environmental considerations. Both of these together ensure that our schools are smart, and that's our ultimate goal. And with this project, we found that after looking at our rubric and the different elements of the rubric, we were able to invite other partners to join us with this project funding. ResinBid, we have other persons who are helping us with the schools. And I just want to go over it just a bit because I just made some points so that we understand how the collaboration is now helping the overall Smart Schools concept, the safe plus green equals Smart Schools concept. And so the government, who is the lead on all of this, making sure that we achieve our goals in terms of safe. We want to have oversight over the entire project. We go out and do those safe inspections, work along with the schools and work along with the ministries to make sure that they have their certifications. We are also responsible for the resilience portion of it. If you guys have heard about the campus cert training and ensure that the teachers and the students have the information And we are also keen on making sure that we ensure the great participation and the coordination amongst the partners. With this particular project, we have 3 other partners, our local Red Cross office. We have another local NGO called Green VI, and we also have our local college, the H. Labadee Community College, but this is the section for marine biodiversity. And if you understand that each one of these partners also appeal to Resumbig's overall program, it also ties into what we want to achieve with the safe plus green equals smart schools concept. And so our other partners, BVI Red Cross, they're assisting us with some community assessments, and they're also assisting us with ensuring that our teachers are trained to be able to help our kids in case something happens during schooling hours. We have Green VI, who is assisting with the greening or the environmental consideration of our assessments. They go out and ensure that the recycling programs are in place. Our school gardens, the children are very engaged in our school gardens and ensuring too that our water quality and our energy quality and usage is definitely tracked, and we can find ways to be more efficient. In terms of the HLSCC, the college, the Marine section, they are also working to ensure that they get more education out about the coastal resilience and actually sharing that information at the primary level up to the tertiary level. I just want to show you some pictures because currently we are still working on the project. We just have a little bit more time to kind of wrap up, but so far they've gone out and have done trainings with the teachers. They've engaged the students. They're in the classroom showing them how the marine life and the other elements of the greening can impact their lives. And they're showing these children within the classrooms. Children are actually, taking part in preparing their garden spaces. This young man in the middle, he is probably one of what they call the rangers at the schools who are helping with the intercare traps. These are helping with reducing the mosquito breeding. And so there are some older kids who are working with the Green VI NGO to make sure that they learn and how to do these different things for themselves. What you don't notice here, the other one that they're using an air to water generator where it's actually pulling the moisture from the air and creating water. The children are really taking part in it, and they actually love this. And this is going to be installed in each one of the schools just to help with greening. We don't want them to be using the plastic water bottles. And if they have this device, it would help to reduce the waste in the schools, in the classrooms. And then also going out to helping the kids get out into the environment. This is our mangrove park, and actually showing how the kids would be actually taking part in the planting and learning how to care for the mangrove environment and making sure that they do the best things so that they don't damage them. So it all means that all this information that we're sharing with them from this level helps them to have more information later on to help care for the environment. All right, and even at the end of this whole process, our whole safe plus green assessment process, we really just want to make sure that our schools are safe. We go out and we certify the schools stay certified for about 3 years, and then we go out and do a reassessment. But our Ministry of Education is a part of this process. They continue with the maintenance, and so ensuring that they remain resilient and they remain safe for our kids is really on top of our list. Thank you guys. Thank you very much for listening. And really, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at any one of these social media handles and give us a call or share any concerns you have. I'm I'm open to any questions you might have right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Indeed, we have a lot to learn from the BVI. And let me also take this opportunity to give kudos to BVI. And every opportunity I get there to do that, I will. Because Safe Schools really started off with BVI in the region. And we do have a lot to be thankful for, and to continue to collaborate and share our best practices and lessons learned. I think we have one hand up. Let me just confirm. Yes, Mr. Valdez, go ahead.
Sí, buenas tardes por segunda ocasión. Orestes Valdés del Ministerio de Educación de Cuba. En esta segunda intervención no voy a hablar de nuestras experiencias ni de nuestras buenas prácticas, porque también tenemos que aprender de los países. Y tengo una modesta recomendación. Nosotros en el Ministerio de Educación estamos construyendo un conjunto de indicadores para declarar a las escuelas seguras. Sería interesante que un año vista del foro del 2025, nuestros países pudiéramos compartir los avances, hacia dónde vamos en la construcción de los indicadores para declarar a una escuela segura. Y para finalizar con esta segunda intervención, esta tercera presentación es muy excelente, muy importante y me hace reflexionar en que un aspecto muy importante del manejo de las escuelas en situaciones de desastre es la recuperación lo antes posible del proceso docente educativo. Yo sé que hay muchas escuelas que son utilizadas como centros de albergue y evacuación, pero en el caso de Cuba, nosotros trabajamos por la recuperación del proceso docente educativo, ya sea en la escuela o en casas de familiares y comunidades. Y para ser preciso, a mí me gustaría que nuestros países pudiéramos intercambiar en los indicadores, los estándares para poder declarar una escuela segura. Es lo que yo quería proponer como una modesta recomendación, ya que estamos hablando de escuelas resilientes, pero también escuelas resilientes y seguras, es decir, abordar ambas concepciones en un mismo aspecto. No sé si hay alguna experiencia de indicadores de escuelas seguras, si hay algún país que ha podido avanzar, y mi propuesta sería socializar, compartir lo que tengamos hasta el momento. Gracias por su paciencia y por escuchar.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Valdez. Michelle, I don't know if you want to respond, if BVI has any of those indicators.
You know, yes, in our smart toolkit, we have, I want to just say, it's a list of standards and indicators that we actually go out to the schools and line by line tick what they do have. So we do have this kit where it comes to safe, and there's the green standards as well. When we add those two standards, it makes the school ultimately smart. So I believe we're in a position to be able to work with anyone or share our standards or share our toolkit with anybody. I'm sure we can do that.
And let me also add that for us at CDIMA as well, I think along with the BVI, we have developed the school safety toolkit as well, with all of those indicators, which are being used as we go out to do the assessments in schools. And we are looking at the 3 areas, of course, the environmental, the infrastructure, and the green component. All of those, we do have those indicators that we are using to be able to assess our schools on a regular basis. And also coming out of this, we have just recently developed our Safe School Recognition Program. So we are working with schools. Currently, we have rolled out a recognition program in 6 pilot countries. And I must admit, thus far, it has been working really well, encouraging schools. I remember when I came to the BVI and I met with your small team, we had some discussions on that. And so we have rolled out, and we are going to be assessing, hopefully by next year, where we are and how we can even further improve what we are doing in terms of using those indicators to bring our schools to an acceptable level where all components, looking at school safety holistically, as we move forward. Thank you so much, Mr. Any other questions from the floor?
Muchas gracias.
I don't see any hand. I don't see any questions in the chat. So let us move on. For our panelists, we do have a few questions, 3 roundtable questions that we are going to place on the screen. I will ask Marcel to do so. And we are going to give you some time where you can answer the questions as best as you can, or we can just have some quick deliberations. So the first one is, we have heard about the importance of early warning systems and examples of development data systems. How do we ensure linkages with the education system are maximized? And what do these linkages look like? How can these systems strengthen the resilience and the readiness of the education sector and vice versa? So I'm going to ask that you can contemplate on the question, and I will open the floor to both Jeffrey Michelle. I don't know if you want to go first, considering what we are doing in the BVI.
Right, I can try to add a bit of information here. In terms of early warning systems, I know our national early warning system is tied into all sectors. We have, especially in the education sector, we have made sure that we have what we call the smart radios, I want to call it. And if they're in an area where they're not able to hear the national siren, give either the test or the national alert, they would have that in their schools. I believe that we already have been working with each one of the schools to ensure that they have the information either through this smart radio, or we ensure that we have connections through our disaster liaison program, especially with the schools and the school population. And we also want to make sure that they have all the training that they need, especially when it comes to little ones. So when you hear we're pushing this system and pushing whatever development that we have, we want to make sure the schools get it first. And they have the access from directly from our office and through me. I want to say I'm one of those persons who make sure I connect with them.
Thank you very much. I know with these early warning systems, just before Jeffrey comes on, we tend to link those early warning systems to flooding, to tsunamis. In your countries, have you developed maybe the emergency routes for tsunamis, for example, and are schools practicing those? Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
I believe our schools are the #1 participants in our drills. I know there's the regional exercise that's coming up very soon. And if you notice by my first slide, we make sure that each one of our schools practice these drills. You would have noticed that the BVI is also tsunami ready and EMAP ready. So we do have documented all our evacuation routes. We've made that public especially, and we've ensured that the schools are aware of their evacuation routes especially. So we are continually updating our systems. We are continually updating our routes. Maybe somebody might feel that a particular route, evacuation route, is not the best for their school, but we're doing our best too in terms of our GIS and our technical team, mapping out the best route for each school and hoping that they practice these on a regular basis, even outside of this regional exercise.
Thank you, Michelle. Jeffrey, over to you. Do you see your agency being able to assist in this way?
Now there are many data pockets within Trinidad and Tobago which are not connected. And there is definitely a need for a data repository. Now, DataNet will soon have data on all sectors of Trinidad and Tobago, and we will be meeting with the Ministry of Education to ensure that the relevant indicators are added to the education sector. The Ministry of Education must play a vital role in identifying and providing the data. Such a system would strengthen the resilience of the education sector by maximizing all available data, by making all available data accessible. You will not have to wonder, where can I find this information? We are exposed to hurricanes, earthquakes, flooding, societal hazards, which with increasing violence in and around schools, even anthropogenic hazards, where we recently had an oil spill just off the coast of Tobago. And we must take into account the fact that a significant proportion of the population in the region lives in coastal villages. Now, in the event of a disaster, imagine electricity and internet being down, and you can't, you could still access our mobile app and get indicators such as, the population of schools by area, the number and type of schools, the number of community centers or health centers within a certain district, the lists on number of open spaces such as parks, savannas, hospitals, sporting facilities, number and capacity of shelters, as well as all other education-based indicators such as, the regular pupil-teacher ratio, literacy, completion rates, and so on. And with proper coordination and collaboration, this data portal will be successful.
Thank you very much. I just want to share very quickly some information that was shared and some questions. Maybe we can answer them very quickly. It says these presentations have been insightful and highlight a broad spectrum of areas regarding data and schools. Some focused more on data, some focused more on the importance of risk reduction and resilience, all framed under the idea of the importance of investing broadly into the different components of education, as we saw in the first presentation by GEEAP. For example, how can we work together for example, the data form portals like the ones presented by Mr. Charles can inform systems like that presented by Ms. Ambrose and vice versa. How do we more effectively share and utilize the information out there to ensure schools are safe and students and communities are safe? Let me just repeat the two questions. the data from portals like the one shared by Mr. Charles can inform systems like that presented by Ms. Ambrose and vice versa. How do we more effectively share and utilize the information out there to ensure schools are safe and students and communities are safe? So going on the heels of what Jeffrey would have just shared, and what Ms. Ambrose have shared, how can we now merge all of these? Michelle, any response?
When I hear this question, I think about visibility and reach and how we're able to help the community understand what we're doing and how we can use the data and the information that we've gathered through our assessments can be communicated to persons so they know what we're doing, so they know that our efforts are not in vain and that there are progresses and that we have their children's interest in best interest at heart. So I think that even with Mr. Jeffrey's system, we can, in some cases, help persons to understand through that same system our assessment and the scores and where each school might be at, hoping that all of them would be safe at the end. But even if they're not safe, they can know where they are and how they can contribute to helping them get to those top standards and ensure that the kids are in an environment that's best for their learning.
Absolutely. And I think it's a matter of utilizing the data to be able to help us to make educated recommendations and suggestions so that at the end of the day, everybody is safe. That's very important. Thank you so very much for your responses to this question. We move very quickly to question number 2. While significant advances have been made in recent years in the Caribbean with regards to establishing information systems for informed decision-making, challenges still remain on promoting information sharing among countries of the region. What are the key challenges as they relate to building the ideal, resilient education system, and what are steps to overcome them? So basically, data sharing has been a challenge throughout, whether it be among countries or among government departments, private sector, that has always been a challenge. So how do you foresee us overcoming those challenges, basically? Okay, I don't see Jeffrey on. I'm not sure if you want to go with this one.
Okay. First challenge I could think of is that we need timely data. Now, the Ministry of Education needs to get data from schools in a timely fashion, and the CSO in turn needs to upload that data as quickly as possible. We need timely data for informed decision making. There is also a need for a proper coordinating system for the data upload. We need to have a framework for who will be responsible for what and with specific deadlines. We need a good monitoring and evaluation system, and we must have regular meetings and reporting. Also, we must have an open data policy to easily share data that is freely accessible. This is a must. Funding for information systems is also a big challenge in the Caribbean. We need more open source software or systems, such as this DataNet platform. We also need to look towards international agencies for technical assistance, training, and possibly purchase of hardware and software. We can make proposals to the government to find to fund these initiatives after showing them its capabilities and the long-term impact. Another challenge I will say is that there are too many small isolated projects. The ideal resilient education system needs to be a collaborative effort. You know, all parties should come together and have the same input. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles. Michelle, do you have any comments on this one?
You know, as Mr. Charles is speaking, I'm agreeing with him, and we see some of this in the BVI, where one, unlike most other countries, we are so concerned with funding. But I believe if these instances are to the top of everyone's list and it's their priority, they can allocate resources and fundings to be able to achieve our goals. And yes, there are quite a bit of sub projects that can very well fit into the larger picture, but it needs to be better coordinated. Yes, it can be the case for other countries as well.
Absolutely. Indeed, some very rich information coming out of there. And I so agree with Jeffrey that there needs to be greater collaboration. I totally agree with that. Too many small pockets, different agencies, and all doing the same thing in some cases. So let's see how we can better utilize the resources. Totally agree with that. Thank you so much for those responses. Let's move on to question 3. How can various stakeholders collaborate more effectively, which is what we're just talking about, including the United Nations, government agencies, non-government agencies, academia, and the private sector in utilizing digital data for knowledge management in the education sector? And what mechanisms or platforms exist or should be developed to facilitate data sharing and collaboration among stakeholders? So 2 critical questions, considering where we are at this juncture. Michelle, I don't know if you want to jump onto this one first, and then we'll call Jeffrey.
You know what? I'm thinking, even with our interaction with the NGOs and other agencies who really want to help us to develop our young people and this safe and smart concept within the schools, we have quite a bit of, I don't want to say kickback, but not so much resources, so to speak, where it comes to the actual mechanisms and platforms. I know we have MOUs with quite a bit of agencies that helps be able to share this information, the information and the data that they would attain when they do their research and they do their outreach. It feeds back into our system as well. We have, like I said, this Smart Schools Toolkit, and it's solely being used within the department and our education sector. And that's trickled out into the private sector schools, not just the government schools, but into the private sector schools. So we are really looking forward to hearing more what other people may suggest and how we can better collaborate and share our information. And like you said, we've already been able to work with a few persons in pushing this safe concept around among the region partners. So we're just open to be able to share and support this entire concept.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Jeffrey, any comments from you on that?
Well, DataNet is one example of a platform that can facilitate this data sharing and collaboration. CSO's survey data and education sector can be uploaded, such as in this case with the mixed data. We can also have administrative data from the education returns from school, can also be there. Data from UE and UTT tertiary data can be uploaded, and so on. This system could handle data from multiple sources and the stakeholders can be involved in the management of their related sectors. So they can have a direct input into the sectors, that they're responsible for the providing the data.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing on those points. Again, going back to what I said earlier, the collaboration is critical, maximizing the use of resources and expertise so that we can, have ourselves in a better place, utilizing data and being able to make informed decisions as far as disaster risk reduction, disaster management, safe schools, you name it, we need that to happen. Okay. I will give the floor for last comments from our presenters. So Michelle, any final comments from you?
You're asking for my comments for this question?
No, generally for your
Generally.
being
Okay.
here. We're wrapping up.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to be able to share. I know, even as you said, we were the pioneers for the Smart Schools project. We continue to progress. We continue to develop and find ways to improve the process. Listening to Mr. Charles here today, I do have some information to take back to my team and how we can be able to integrate some of this data sharing and this platform to be able to pull the information together. Also from these questions, if you haven't noticed, I've been writing, I'm taking notes. This is a very informative session, and I really appreciate that persons were able to come today, listen to us, listen to our perspective, and take some of this information back to their organizations, to their DM offices. So I just want to say on behalf of my director, we really appreciate this opportunity, and we are happy to come back again and share additional information with you later on at different forums. So thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey, final comments?
Yes, thank you all for inviting the Central Statistical Office of Trinidad and Tobago. This was a very interesting forum, knowing that we are just on the statistics side of it, and we are not the experts from the education sector. It was very informative. Just want to take this time to let everyone know, you can download our app. It's DataNet. It's the app on for their mobile device. It's a very good app, and just explore. So thank you once again for inviting us, and it was a very good session.
Thank you so very much. Indeed, it has been a wonderful, very rich session with quite a bit of information. I think we have seen more collaboration. We are seeing greater partnerships being developed. And that is what we are all about when it comes to the CSSI. Learning from each other, seeing where the best practices are, seeing where we have also made the mistakes when it comes to school safety, and learning and being more resilient, basically. So again, I just want to say thank you for this rich discussion, lots of information. I want to thank our participants in a very special way, but let me just say a big thank you to Ms. Rachel Glennester from the Global Education Evidence Advisory Panel, GEEAP. I know she had to drop off to attend another meeting, but we were really, really thankful for the information which she shared with us. There's quite a bit that we can learn in the region from the data that has been collected there. Let me say a big thank you to Mr. Jeffrey Charles, our Central Statistics Office over in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to say thank you. Thank you for the time that you've taken, seeing again the synergies and how statistics and data again is so critical to what we are doing here in the region. I certainly hope that, as you rightly said, one day we can have a repository where all of this data, and we would not be hoarding the data that is so critical for us to make decisions, and that it will be in a place where we have access, and as a united Caribbean region, we can work collectively to ensure our region is more resilient to not just natural, but also the man-made events that we are witnessing. Let me also say thank you so very much to Miss Michelle Ambrose from the BVI, the Department of Disaster Management. Again, as you have shared with us what is happening in the BVI, we continue to look to you as the pioneers, and as we work again collaboratively. It is not a competition, it's a matter of learning, it's a matter of building, it's a matter of empowering our people, our youth in particular, that we have a generation coming, a future that will be more resilient because of what we are doing now. So again, thank you for what you are doing in the BVI and for throughout the region, not just the BVI, but what we've learned from you, and for sharing with us today. We look forward to the continued collaboration, Michelle, and I know I will continue to be reaching out to the BVI as we work collaboratively on safe schools. So thank you so much, and I know Michelle has a passion for disaster management, being in the preparedness and planning manager in her department. We are really, really thankful for sharing all of this information with us. Again, thank you so much for all our panelists. And of course, I want to say a big thank you to Mr. Valdez from Cuba and the rich information that he has shared. I think we can also learn a lot from Cuba, and we look forward to the continued collaboration. I know we are benefiting a lot in other sectors, especially the medical sector, structural and civil engineering, but we're really happy to see what is happening where school safety is in Cuba, and I think we can all come together and really have a very dynamic and resilient region in this area. So again, thank you so very much. I am going to hand over to Mrs. Olga Mushington-Service to bring us some closing remarks on behalf of the chair.
Thank you, Bernays. We have come to the close of this inspiring forum. On behalf of the host and chair of the Caribbean Safe School Initiative, the Honorable Minister of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport of St. Martin, Dr. Anders Rudolph Samuel, I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for your active participation, insightful contributions, and dedication to advancing our shared goals. Over the past 3 days, we have engaged in stimulating discussions, exchanged valuable ideas, and forged new connections that will undoubtedly drive progress in school safety and education sector resilience. This is our second CSSI virtual pre-ministerial forum, with the first one being held in 2021. When I envisioned this virtual forum in 2020 and shared the concept with CDEMA and UNDRR, I could not imagine how it would have become an example of collaboration and inclusion. As we leave this gathering, let us carry forward the enthusiasm and momentum generated here. Let us continue to collaborate, innovate, and strive for excellence in our endeavors. I encourage you to reflect on the knowledge gained, the relationships formed, and the potential opportunities that lie ahead. Together, we have the power to effect positive change and shape a brighter future for us all. On behalf of the organizing committee, I extend my heartfelt thanks to our region's ministers of education, school safety focal points, our region's youth who did an excellent job yesterday, all speakers, volunteers, and staff for their hard work and dedication in making this forum a resounding success. As we part ways, let us remain committed to our shared vision and united in our efforts to create a better region. Let us continue to share best practices and collaborate, for together we can achieve more. St. Martin is thankful for the support received during our chairmanship and look forward to the continued growth of the CSSI as we hand over the chairmanship to St. Lucia in 2025. Thank you. The 2024 Caribbean Safe School Initiative Virtual Pre-Ministerial Forum is hereby closed.